Joining us now, House of Representatives member David Clarke. Had a big story on him in the Georgia Star News a couple days ago. He was also one of the biggest supporters of Governor Brian Kemp during 2018. He's abandoned Kemp and said that he's going to vote for his primary opponent, whoever that may be, and he's joining us now. Representative Clarke, thanks for being with us.
Hey, John, thanks for the invite to be on the show. And you were correct. I never got a Christmas card from the Speaker of the House, David Ralston. So I guess I'm on his naughty list. So, which is a good thing, actually, with him being so corrupt.
All right. Now, you say he's corrupt. I mean, I was flabbergasted that we did the article in Georgia Star News, and it was basically we exposed the Speaker, alleged that he lied to President Trump, said that he could get the 91 votes for the petition for the special session. Then he went out and did the opposite, told people not to vote for it, and he and his henchmen threatened loss of committees, being blackballed if they voted for it, et cetera. So he said one thing, did another. You know, then he had a meet and greet type thing up in Blue Ridge, and he got wind of the fact that 20 people were going to meet and go up and ask him questions, so he bailed on it. He never showed up. And this is your Speaker of the House. What is up with this guy?
Right. He's a coward, but uses his position for monetary gains. He uses it, for his own greed, his own power. But besides that, he doesn't serve the people. And I can say this, his district is a very red district. And his district, if you went and polled it, I guarantee they would ask us, they would demand us to go into special session. So therefore, Speaker Ralston is not representing his district. He's saying one thing to Trump and lying and doing another. And as my father-in-law, Senator Brandon Beach, who was just on your show, he was right. The U.S. Constitution says we are allowed to, just with 91 votes from the House and 29 from the Senate, we could hold a special session and vote on the Electoral College, on the votes here in Georgia. And so if the Speaker wanted it, we could be in session today. This morning, we could be holding a special session just because of all the allegations of fraud and irregularities that happened in the presidential election. So it just shows the Speaker he's a coward, he's a liar, he's lied to Trump, and he's not who he says he is. And I think if you just did some basic research on him, just Googled his name, you would see he's a very corrupt individual and very shady and dark.
Well, look, that article we did basically exposed the Speaker for the strong-arm tactics. But, look, that's, internal Georgia politics, and, we get that. It's he's a Speaker, and you have to kiss his ring or whatever. But the fact that he lied to the president, the fact that he wouldn't hold a special session, if we got 91 votes like he promised, he would have made Butch Miller Majority Leader of the Senate, Jeff Duncan. They would have had to answer to that. They would have had to then – we would have had to say, here are the 23 senators that are voting no, come on a show and tell us why. And they couldn't have hid behind a 3/5 and all the nonsense and spin that they do, which our audience is simply too smart in order to buy any of the crap. So the question is, what happens now? Where do we go now? Everybody knows that follows our show that the voting fraud on November 3rd in Georgia, was beyond the pale. We're trying to decertify the votes. But let's talk about the 5th. What has changed? I asked the same question to Senator Beach. I'm going to ask it to you also. Tell me what's different on the 5th. That's what I want to know. What is going to be different on the 5th that didn't happen on the 3rd?
John, zero. We've done nothing besides run our mouths. Nothing. And here's a crazy thing. I'm today working on getting an investigator from the Secretary of State's office to look into this, but I had a good friend of mine reach out, and her husband works at the U.S. Postal Service. He's worked there his whole life. And he reached out and told me that 1,000 ballots came in from New York from one zip code for the January 5th runoff. 1,000 votes coming in from New York from one zip code. Does sound a little shady, right? And
yes.
I think these are just the things that are coming in. And I keep one after another of these messages and people reaching out who I know. I had another one, a retired police investigator. He just sent me this message yesterday, and he said, I'm a retired police investigator, and he says, unfortunately, I do not trust in the appointed Georgia Republican legislatures. However, he said he does have trust in me based on me calling out the governor and my colleagues for not stepping up. But he said that he had walked by a group of young men who were talking. He overheard a conversation pertaining to the election, and one of the individuals said that they can do whatever they want in Atlanta, and they also said that we're going to pack so many ballots in Chatham County that they won't know what hit them. And you just think about this. These are people who are literally getting on their computers. They're sending you a message. Somebody who is a police investigator here in Georgia, but we're getting thousands of these. Phone calls coming in of people trying to report allegations of overhearing or actually seeing it firsthand. And we're not holding the hearings that we should be. We should be in special session now, just based on the hundreds and hundreds, thousands of allegations of fraud and irregularities, but we're not. We're just turning a blind eye. And I think, Jeff Duncan, him going on CNN, right, literally almost the day after the November 3rd election, saying, nope, there's no fraud. When we know there was fraud, the only question is how much was there, and would that change the outcome of the election, which I believe it would. But it's so wrong for Republican leadership to be the ones denying what we know to be true.
Why are they doing that, in your judgment, David Clarke?
I think I'm just as much confused in some ways as everyone else trying to ask these questions, trying to pinpoint what it is. I think sometimes it's just spineless elected officials who are spineless, who don't want to take a punch, right? They just want to go along to get along instead of run on their election promises, right, to the voters who voted them in. Yes, and anyway, so that's one. Another one, compromised. They have dirt. They have some corruption that people have on them, and so those people go to them and say, "Hey, open your mouth, and if you call out corruption, we're going to call you out for your corruption, right?" So it's like a catch-22, and I think that's the problem: is too many are compromised. They're owned by somebody. They have done something they shouldn't have done. I mean, there is so much. I could go on for days talking about the dirt, just basic dirt. If somebody maybe cheated on a spouse, or someone who did something, and now it's known, and I guarantee they'll hold it over somebody forever, right? Well, you did this, you do this, I'm gonna expose this, right? So sometimes it could be a big sin they did, or it could be a small sin, right? But it's enough to keep them in line, right? To say, hey, if you spill the beans, if you take a stand for integrity, for election integrity, well, I'm going to burn you. So, do you know what I'm saying? So some of this it could be a big sin, a small sin, but it's enough to keep them in line. I think a lot with seeing that is just so many compromise with a mixture of people who are just spineless, who ran on great political rhetoric, but they've never been in a fight. And that's the big difference.
Well, and I think it's just easier. It's just easier to say, nothing to see here. We had a perfect election. No worries. It was the most secure election ever. And by the way, I need to get those suburban moms driving around in soccer SUVs in 2022 in order to beat Stacey Abrams. I mean, that's really what this was about. I mean, this was
exactly.
A political calculation that Duncan, I don't know about Raffensperger. I don't believe anything he says. But I believe Duncan and Kemp, they're very ambitious, and they sold out to these Dominion voting machines. That's an issue. I mean, the fact that the decision was made quickly, it was $107 million. Texas rejected it. They did research. They said no. Other states rejected it. Georgia spent $107 million. They rolled it out everywhere. That was a bit, the fact that Raffensperger's brother was tied to one of the companies, that doesn't feel good to people. The fact that his Brian Kemp, Secretary of State, Chief of Staff, was the chief lobbyist for Dominion voting machines, that doesn't feel good to people. I mean, look, I'm not connecting conspiracy dots, but it just doesn't feel good to people. I mean, it doesn't feel good.
And John, even with Gabriel Sterling, who works at the Secretary of State, which, I mean, he's an embarrassment to our state. But he was making, I think, if I'm remembering right, $115,000 through the Secretary of State's office. Then he switched over and became a contractor, handling some stuff for the Secretary of State during this year. And he's got paid, I think it was $200,000. And even with health care, right, and other benefits, he might not be getting with the state for 1 year, right? He's just taken off for a year. But he gets, that's a huge increase. What is that, like a 74% increase? I mean, it's massive. From $115,000 to $200,000, that easily covers your health care and a few other things. Even though I know health care is expensive. But it just shows you there's so many shady things and how we're operating. And then also going back to what you said, how so many are saying this was the most fair, transparent, and secure election in America's history, right? But at the same time, we had the biggest mail-in ballots, right, going out. You have the Secretary of State who just came out and finally is admitting that, okay, fraud could have happened. In a way, he said that, and he said that with the absentee ballots and how we handled them, that there is a big reason for fraud to happen. And even experts have said over and over that the easiest way to do fraud is mail-in ballots. And so again, is how can we say it's most secure when we had so many mail-in ballots, right? We had so many going out that it's ripe for fraud. And for us to say, no, this is most secure, is being disingenuous, is not being honest, and it shows why so many and tens of millions of Americans believe this election was rigged. And I'm one of them. I think in many ways it was. And unless we get to the bottom of it, we can never move forward and say that this election was a secure one.
See, that's where I'm with you, David Clarke, with us, House of Representatives member, State House of Representatives member. Let me make that clear. In Georgia, from the Beaufort area, Representative David Clarke. I mean, to me, you've got the November 3rd issue. That's got to get resolved. I don't think Biden won Georgia. I think those 16 electors, one way or the other, should go to Trump, because the fraud is just so rampant. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's another affidavit, and you start adding them all up. It's obvious. Thousands of votes, no chain of custody. Tens of thousands. I mean, we can go on and on and on again. But nothing, like you said, nothing is going to change on the 5th. So when people ask me, well, what have you heard? What about the polling in Georgia? It's like, who cares? I mean, none of that matters, because they're going to steal it again. And so we're going to be there on election night, and it's going to be, midnight, and Loeffler and Perdue are going to have a lead, 200,000. And then we're going to sign off, go to bed, get up, and they're going to be losing when the mail-in ballots mysteriously show up at 2 to 4 a.m. the following morning. We know that's going to happen, and they're doing nothing to stop it. I mean, they've got mobile voting machines roaming around Atlanta. Those are illegal. Has anybody done anything to stop that, Representative Clarke?
Not from what I've seen. And again, I'm just as upset is because so many elected officials are doing zero. They're just kind of turning a blind eye. They're saying, we can't do anything, instead of stepping up. And so I'm with you. I think we're going to see not good positive results coming in.
I get a kick out of the people who say there's no evidence, and I'm going to go to a quick word from our sponsors in a second, so hang there with us. But they keep saying there's no evidence. I mean, the evidence of fraud in Georgia, you've got over let's see, it's 150,000 votes that we've already determined people that shouldn't have voted. Illegal aliens, underage, not registered, don't live in the state, voted 2 times. I mean, That's called evidence, all right? It's hard. Nobody will simply do anything with it. So don't keep telling me there's no evidence. The evidence is overwhelming. Nobody will just act on it. That's the problem. If you had a special session and that evidence came out, those electors go to Trump. Is there any chance this petition can get recirculated that or let me ask you another thing. Is there a way, you said you had 30 votes, right? Is there a way for us to get the 30 people that voted for that were part of calling this special session, David?
You mean the 30 who signed on the petition? So we have 30. I think it's 31 now. But we need 91, so that's what we need. And supposedly, the guy who heads it up, the other petition said we had over 59, so 59 or 61, and those names have never been dropped. So it just shows you again. I mean, the speaker yields such power. I just think there's almost a zero chance of it happening unless the speaker steps up and leads in the way he should.
And he's not going to do that. Kemp's not going to call a special session. So basically, nothing has changed in Georgia. No special session. No way to convene. So when do you guys convene officially? January what?
It'll be the second Monday of January.
All right, so that's going to be January.
That'll be on the 11th.
11th. Okay, so you convene on the 11th. Are you still able to decide the electors then, or is it too late?
I have not looked on the 11th if we have the same power to be able to do that based on the Constitution. Is something I do need to look into. Right now, I'm more focused on right now, doing it at the moment. But I've not looked on the 11th, seeing if a date changes on that. So I cannot answer that right now.
I just want to read you this. Barron's admits that 106,000 of 113,000 scanned ballots had to be adjudicated to determine voter intent. This was in Fulton County. He says at least 3 times. Interesting that the machines flagged such a high percentage. So you've also got this whole machine issue with this error rate going on, so they have to be adjudicated. And of course, that's done. The adjudication is done in the dark by hand, and Democrats were doing it. I mean, it's just your head explodes, and nothing is going to change on January the 5th. Nothing. That is why we're so incensed over it. And for people to be calling me up, asking me about, well, tell me what's going on the ground. Tell me what the latest polls are. Is it this poll accurate or that poll accurate? Who cares? Who knows? They're going to steal it again. So it doesn't matter what the polls say. Just like it didn't matter what the last poll said. Unbelievable. The frustration here has got to be at a fever pitch that Republicans control Georgia, and they will do nothing to stop November 3rd steal or January 5th steal. Unbelievable.
Yep. And do you have a few attorneys even who serve in the House and who have said, well, we can't hold a special session because based on, the Constitution, all that, because the courts are going to shoot it down, maybe, possibly. And it's like, that's like saying when we voted on the heartbeat bill, which I thought was an amazing bill. I mean, I'm absolutely pro-life. And it got shot down in the end. But just because they shoot it down doesn't always mean they're right. That's their opinion. And it's our duty as elected officials to stand on the campaign promises that we promised. And when there's allegations of fraud and irregularities, we should be coming into session. When you have the Secretary of State now finally saying, okay, yeah, there is definitely room for fraud based on how our election system is set up and absentee ballots and all that, why would we not come in? Why would we not? I mean, to come in is just to fix the problem, to make sure that on both sides we know our votes counted. I mean, isn't that fighting for freedom and fighting for election fairness and transparency? I would say so.
I would say so. We're going to end on that. I want to thank Representative David Clarke for being with us. David, thank you for being with us, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, John.